Okay, welcome back, dear friends. Today I have something epic for you. This is my first interview ever on the first time I had my radio show ever. This was on Revolution Radio in March 2013. I was recruited to be on that station after they had seen my the documentary I made with Third Phase of Moon, where I interviewed Dr. Roger Lear on camera. So that was really the first interview I had done. But then I was offered a show. My co-host, you'll see, is Preston Dennett. And after that, in the show, you'll actually hear Blake Cousins from Third Phase of Moon calling in and asking some questions. The only thing you would have ever seen of this is a 10-minute portion of when Blake called in and put it on Third Phase of Moon in 2013. Outside of that, unless you were listening to Revolution Radio in those years when I was on, you have never ever heard this before. Let me just say one last thing. Yes, it's an older interview, and may Stanton Friedman rest in peace. Older interviews don't mean they shouldn't be listened to. I always go back and hear things because you will hear stuff that you no longer hear in the current time. And also, the older an incident is, to speak to someone who knows about that incident closer to when that incident happens, you're actually going to get more information than you would if you just heard it, say, 20, 30 years later. That's why it's always important to go back and hear these legends, the Godfather of ufology, and everyone else I will start to show you if you're interested. So without further ado, take a listen and let me know what you think of my very first interview. Yes, I was a little green. I am going to say that right off the bat, but I think overall you guys will all enjoy this. Here you go.
.com, where the fight begins and information never sleeps.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Welcome to Third Phase of Moon. My name's Blake Cousins. Now get ready for the start of an amazing journey. The largest YouTube channel is now on the largest civilian-run radio station, Third Phase of Moon Radio, with researchers on a mission. Host Dr. J. Andy Elias and best-selling author, MUFON investigator Preston Dennett are about to take you on all the rides of our lives. We'll be taking UFO news, interviewing top researchers. The journey begins now. Third Phase of Moon Radio is officially on air. Without further ado, here comes Third Phase of Moon, researchers on a mission.
Good morning, folks. Good afternoon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be. I'm your host, Dr. J. Andy Elias, here with Preston Dennett, the one and only MUFON researcher of 23 years, who's also a best-selling author, 15 amazing books. Go ahead and say hi, Preston.
Hi, John. Hello, everyone.
Excellent. I just want to give everyone a little bit of information about what's to come. Today, we have an amazing show with Stanton Friedman. We'd like to take your calls. Call us in at 347-688-2902. The second half, Blake Cousins will also be joining us. And for those of you who don't know, let's just remind you, the Cousins brothers, Blake and Brent Cousins, from Third Phase of Moon, a team I joined last year, they've been working real hard to provide everybody with access to the largest library of UFO videos. If you've captured anything amazing, find us via Skype or Facebook at Third Phase of Moon. Spell out Third Phase, T-H-I-R-D, Phase, P-H-A-S-E, of Moon, all in one word. Contact us, which brings us to our contest. We have two categories. We'd like to give you an autographed book of your choice from Preston Dennett. My favorite is UFOs over California. If you live in New York, maybe UFOs over New York would be your favorite. Or if you live in New Mexico, UFOs over New Mexico, as well as Ghosts in California and New York. He's got a large library of them. Check him out at PrestonDennett.com. Also, I want to tell you, everybody, that April 6th, Lorian Fenton is going to be coming to the show. But next week, we have on the 30th, March 30th, we have Dr. Roger Lear. With regards to April 13th, Saturday, here at revolutionradiofreedomslips.com, we are trying to build the show for what you guys like. Do you want another ufologist? Do you want to speak to some controversial contactees, abductees? We want to hear from you. You let us know. Call us at 347-688-2902. Instant message us right here while we're on air. Tell us what you'd like to see. Or email me at John@Rome Productions, JOHN @Rome, ROAM. Remember, Rome, researchers on a mission. And like I said, today we have the Stanton Friedman. Next week we got Dr. Lear. The following week, Lori and Fenton will be covering. And the 13th, it's open for you guys for your suggestions. If not, I'll get us another ufologist and maybe some abductees, and who knows where we'll go. But nonetheless, we're going to have a great time. Now, before we get Friedman online, I'd like to talk a little bit about Preston's books. First of all, like I just mentioned, you can go on PrestonDennett.com and order his books. My personal favorite, because I live in California, is UFOs over California. He has an entire chapter on the Eisenhower meeting, and I figured we could talk a little bit about that because that will segue into what happened before, which in the Roswell, and then we'll basically where Stanton Friedman came in as the civilian researcher. Preston, in your book, you have an amazing letter that was written from, I believe, someone in the UK, right? And in the letter, he stated some amazing people who were there, like Howard Hughes, Albert Einstein, if I'm not correct, the Prime Minister, the UK, in the Prime Minister, the second in command in the UK, was it the Minister of Defense, Attlee? I'm not quite sure. You could tell us a little more about this, Preston.
Yeah, this is a huge, huge story, and actually started when the President Eisenhower, disappeared for a short period, and the press went wild. The backstory was that he had an emergency visit with a dentist. But it turned out that was not true. Apparently he was secreted to Edwards Air Force Base where he had this meeting with ETs and world leaders. Now this sounds like an outrageous story at first glance, but immediately, researchers were really taking this seriously. I mean, there are some serious researchers who were coming out and saying that this had actually happened.
Let me just add in there, when he was whisked away to go to Edwards Air Force Base, there were speculations of what happened to him. There were even some newspaper reports, breaking news stories, that he actually died of a heart attack.
Right. Can you believe that? They released a press release saying he had died. It was retracted immediately.
That just goes to show that obviously even the inner circle that followed, the media that followed him around, he was able to get that media away because, as you all know, when the Air Force One takes off and he's got all his dignitaries, his people with the President of the United States, got everybody he needs on board, he also has the media that travels with him. Apparently during this situation, he was able to get rid of the media that were following him, whisked away to Edwards Air Force Base, and what was it, three different ships that landed? 3 different species?
Right. They showed how their ships what these ships could do, that they could turn invisible, and they offered a deal with them. They were really worried about our nuclear testing, and they were pretty concerned about that and wanted to kind of give us an education on spiritual matters and this type of thing. And we wanted technology, and there was kind of an impasse there. As I understand it, the president was taken for an actual ride in one of these craft, and
the treaty that was signed apparently between, or agreed on, I don't know how they would sign it if they don't use the language that we do. Nonetheless, I don't know, was it a telepathic treaty? There was a treaty that was formed that basically said, we'll give you technology, let us abduct some of your people so we could research on them, and we'll give you the list of abductions, but no more nuclear weapons. Apparently, both sides violated it, but it started with us because Eisenhower and his administration refused to stop nuclear weapons. Now, they wanted us to go public. The ETs said, and we did not want to do that either because we felt that it would collapse our religious and social structure. So it was an impasse there. Yeah, Eisenhower said, if I'm not correct, misquoting your book, it said,
in a letter, which is, like you said, over the years, more and more people have come about to tell this amazing story and have actually confirmed it rather than denied or found inconsistencies. More and more witnesses. But part of it, he said the world is not quite ready, which I don't know what that meant. Was he going to do a 50-year desensitization? What we're doing now.
50 years are almost up now.
Oh, gosh, it's been more than that.
That was 1954. That was quite a while back.
59 years. He's hitting the 6-decade mark. So let's hope this happens. You know, this year there's supposed to be a global disclosure day hosted by Stephen Bassett. He's doing the citizens hearing at the end of April in the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., testifying with the top former military brass and former military or civilian agencies, intelligence agencies, and the whistleblowers that have come out, and will testify to former congressmen. And I don't know if there's any senators that are going to be present, but nonetheless, it's going to be an important event to see what they can do about getting this amazing, you know, story to finally be disclosed. And I think from what I've heard is, as a rising power, China has now actually, you know, the world doesn't follow what the U.S. says anymore in that sense. Back 20, 30 years ago when we were the superpower, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, when we said jump, as far as when the U.S. government told other world powers to jump, they basically said, how high? And that's, in other words, what happened. And now we're not so big of the superpower anymore. We're not telling China what to do. As a matter of fact, you know, we got more of them coming in. And actually now, I think I have Mr. Friedman in or another caller. Let's get this caller and add him to the line. It might be our guests. Hello, welcome to Revolution Radio. Hello? Area code 506, are you there? Hello, we cannot hear you. Area code 506. Okay. Try calling us back. Let's hope that was it. Nonetheless, where we were picking up right where we left off before we went. We would say jump, they would say how high. Now,
Right.
Things have changed in the sense that other powers have emerged, and we don't know why. And we don't know how to control them. Not we know why. But they're trying to, in other words, some have threatened to go public because they say that the secret, keeping it up, is too costly as far as finances, and that's what's dealing with this cover-up. Anyway,
Right. Well, it's true. The cover-up is, you know, a huge problem, and the black budget, the one that's, you know, funding all of this, is way excessive to a point that I don't think a lot of people even realize. But the cover-up, you know, it's definitely still in place, but it's a disastrous failure. A lot of people are coming out, and we're seeing some huge changes. And this is, I think, the biggest change in the whole area of UFO research. So I'm really
I
excited.
agree. And Mr. Preston, I think we got Mr. Friedman online. If you can hear us, Mr. Friedman, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Aha! You are live on Revolution Radio. Live right here for everybody here to listen. For all you folks out there, this is the Godfather of Ufology. And as I like to call him, Stan the Man. He recently won the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 2013 International UFO Congress, which he rightfully deserves. He was the original Roswell researcher. If it wasn't for him, the civilian researcher, this case would have remained buried in the books, because after the press release in 47, people just kind of forgot about the story until Mr. Friedman revived it. 55 years of researching. The nuclear physicist, we have him here on the show. He is a library of information, and not to mention one of the most wonderful and nicest men I ever met. He is my personal hero, and I am very happy to have him on the show. So,
I'll pay you later.
Okay, send it to the Swiss account. Nonetheless, before we go, I just want to let any listeners, if you guys have any questions to ask of this amazing man, feel free to call us in at area code 347-688-2902, here to be live on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. But, you know, without further ado, let's just jump straight into it, Mr. Friedman. You know, you keep mentioning, or the words you coined of this cosmic Watergate, which I fully agree could be no better, in no better way. This is the story of the millennia for mankind. Not a millennia. This is the story for all of human history. They've been pondering that question, are we alone? And more than likely, it looks that several thousand years ago, they knew we weren't alone. And now, for unknown reasons, or some known national security reasons, the factions in the government that decide to keep it suppressed are still holding this cosmic Watergate. What do you think it's going to take to break this down, this barrier, and get the people the information they need to know?
Well, I think there are two parts of the situation. One is I honestly believe, having worked under security for 14 years, that there are some very legitimate national security concerns here. If we have developed new technology as a result of recovering wreckage at Roswell and Aztec and other places, then I don't think it should be put out on the table unless the Russians and the Chinese and anybody else who's gathered new technology also puts what they have out on the table. There is a good reason for security. National security is an important consideration. And we have always done advanced research and development in secret. Look at the stealth aircraft, 10 years, $10 billion, all in secret. So you can understand that. On the other hand, there's a separate question here. Should the world be told that indeed the planet's being visited, and there's some things we ought to be looking at in order to get ready for the ultimate disposition of that problem? Who speaks for planet Earth? Who owns the resources of the planet that they may be stealing from us, as a matter of fact? How are we going to handle the fact that our planet is clearly a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare? This year we will spend $1 trillion on things military. What kind of crazy place is this?
And
so we need to recognize.
I was going to say, not just the $1 trillion. We have also the black budgets that's funded these. So $1 trillion is what we know that's going to be spent on military. That's not to include the budgets that we don't know of that are, probably building.
Of course.
So I just wanted to throw that in there, that the amount of money that's being invested into this military is a ridiculous amount. It would solve all the problems.
But it gives you a picture, though, of what kind of beings we Earthlings are. How many children died yesterday and the day before, etc., from preventable disease and starvation, when we could have fed them all with that money? So there are some revolutions that need to be made in how we think about ourselves, how we think about each other on the planet. I give 6 reasons, really, a number of reasons why secrets are being kept. And remember, this is not just the United States that's keeping these secrets. The secrets are being kept all over the planet. People say, oh, yes, France put out their data, and England put out. They didn't put out their top secret data. And there's a big difference. It's just like the NSA. You can get, if you work at least 156 top secret Umbra UFO documents. Wow. The only trouble is you can only see 3 lines per page. Everything else is whited out. The CIA has released documents which are blacked out except for maybe 6 words. So, they didn't withhold it all, only almost all. So the secrecy thing is a big story. And we need to recognize that many of the people who say that governments can't keep secrets haven't the faintest idea of what they're talking about. Dr. Seth Shostak of the SETI Institute. You know that SETI stands for Silly Effort to Investigate, SETI. Seth has said the proof that governments can't keep secrets is how badly FEMA did with Katrina and how badly the post office is run.
Yes.
Now, I don't see any connection between those things and national security, the NSA, DIA, CIA, ONI, NRO, all those guys. Dr. Tyson of the Hayden Planetarium, great astronomer, he says the proof that governments can't keep secrets is how much we know about President Clinton's genitalia.
Yeah.
It's funny remark. It's an utterly absurd remark. These guys don't understand security. And we should not let them act as if they are guiding the fort of truth and good for all of us, because they're not. And incidentally, let me give those quick 6 reasons for the cover-up, in my view, anyway. First is you want to figure out how the darn things work. They make wonderful weapons delivery and defense systems. Now, I'm talking here about what I call Earth excursion modules, the ones that rattle around in the atmosphere. I'm not talking about the motherships that get here between star systems. You know, people say, how could something that comes from another star system crash? It didn't. The mothership didn't crash. A little Earth excursion module crashed. And we do the same thing, incidentally. The Navy has small airplanes that ride on big aircraft carriers. The aircraft carrier is about 1,000 feet long, and they can operate nuclear-powered ones for 20 years without refueling. The airplanes can only operate for an hour, 2 or 3 without refueling. So we have here a direct analog. Anyway, the first reason you want to cover it up because you worry about how they work, and you don't want your enemies to know what you know. The second reason is the exact opposite of that. What if your enemies figure out how they work before you do? You don't want them to know you know they know. Weapon, counter-weapon, counter-weapon. We've been playing this game for a very long time. You know, bigger spears, stronger shields, etc. Those 2 are obvious reasons. The third isn't so obvious. If an announcement were to be made tomorrow by highly trusted individuals around the planet, a little hard to find, but my favorite couple, an odd couple, if you will, is the Queen and the Pope. They're almost the same age, and, you know, if they were to make an announcement that indeed Earth is being visited by extraterrestrial spacecraft, what would happen? We have to ponder that for a minute. Well, presumably, some things that we're not happy about would happen. There might be riots. There might be church attendance going up. There might be stock market going down. When anything upsets the equilibrium, stock markets go down. There could be a lot of things that we haven't even thought about. Religion may have troubles. Now, the fourth, so, you know, what do we want to do? Oh, the biggest thing, I think, would be that the younger generation, which, unlike me, was never alive when there wasn't a space program. There was no space program back when I was growing up. That was Buck Rogers nonsense, you know. Anyway, the younger generation might push for us to think of ourselves as Earthlings instead of as Americans, Greeks, Peruvians, Russian, whatever. After all, from an alien viewpoint, we are all Earthlings. We don't like that very much. We spend a lot of effort trying to kill each other and all that sort of thing. But, you know, nationalism is the only game in town. And I'll guarantee you one thing. People in power don't want to give up power. That's one of the rules of the game.
Of course.
So anything that would lead people to think they should owe their allegiance to the planet instead of the individual government, we can't have that. Now, the fourth reason is quite different. Pat Robertson syndrome. He says that there is no intelligent life other than on Earth. This UFO stuff is the work of the devil, he says. Evidence, he doesn't provide any. There isn't any. But there are people who go along with Pat. He also says the world was created in 4004 BC. I think he left 6 zeros out of that number.
That's very true.
You know, so there are people who believe it, and they have the right to believe whatever they please, but don't try to impose it on me, is my feeling. And there's another reason. People say, hey, if aliens are coming here, that means they're more advanced than we are. Yeah, sure it does. So what? But that means that soon there'll be new methods of energy production. There goes the oil companies. Ground and air transport. There goes the car and plane companies. Computers and communication systems. There goes those guys. Economic chaos, right?
Yes.
Well, you know, I think we survived stopping the manufacture of buggy whips, don't you?
Yes.
And finally, the sixth problem, because I given over 700 lectures in all 50 states and 10 provinces and 18 other countries, I get exposed to lots of stories. on 7 different occasions, people have very quietly told me about American military airplanes. Well, 6 were American, 1 was not. Chasing UFOs and not coming back. And as a matter of fact, there was a regulation, whatever you want to call it, put out by the Air Force in 1952. Shoot them down if they don't land when ordered to do so. Think about that for a minute. How the heck do you tell an alien spacecraft flying by your window, hey, get your tail down on the ground there, guys? So the families, of course, were not told anything about this. And I do get a problem with people who say, well, of course the families would have been told. Stan, don't you understand how this planet operates? Yeah, I do. That's why I say they wouldn't be told. To give you an example, there's a book, By Any Means Necessary, by William Burroughs. 166 U.S. military men on board airplanes, reconnaissance planes that were shot down while flying close to North Korea, China, and Russia back in mostly the late 40s, early 50s. Not one word was said in public. The families were not told what happened until 2001. A meeting was called, and the families were brought in, given the medals their kin had earned. And we had shot down some Russian airplanes, too, while we were at it, and didn't say anything about that either. So Uncle Sam doesn't like to admit that things like that have happened. I think you can understand that.
Definitely. So on the last... on your last thing that you were saying with the chasing UFOs, not only did we have an order to shoot them down, and not only did a lot of pilots crash, there was that one case in the 50s where this one pilot was speaking to the control tower that he was chasing after this object that he was climbing. It's in his sights, and next thing we know, we can't hear from him, and he crashed. In other words, he just, I don't know what the speculation.
You mean the Mantell case?
Yes, that's the case I was referring to. And of course, that was one of ones that's happened to get out. But like you said, I'm sure there's been several that the families were told differently, and maybe in 100 years or 50 years from now, their great grandchildren will actually find out the true story of what happened.
Don't bet on it.
I know, right? I'd like to go.
I should mention that in the book "Shoot Them Down" by Frank Fascino, I wrote the foreword for it. He lists 200 fatal military plane crashes, American planes, between 1951 and 56. 5 of the pilots had over 100 successful missions in Korea where they were being chased by MiGs. They come back to the United States, no MiGs, they crashed. That sounds a little
fishy,
unusual to me.
Yeah, fishy to say the least.
Yes.
You just mentioned a very good point. You said American planes, and this was only during the period of the 50s. Wasn't Stalin also a person who ordered his pilots to shoot them down? Because I heard rumors that he was, I want to use the word jealous, I guess is the closest thing I could come to, that we had recovered craft from Roswell, and he didn't care how many of his people died. He just wanted to get his hands on the spacecraft. And apparently there was this crash in a Kapustin yard. Do you know much about that?
No, there are many stories about crashes in the Soviet Union and in Brazil and elsewhere, even some in Canada. We don't have the full story. That's why it's a cosmic Watergate. We're not going to find out about most of those for some time. But as I say, there's a two-parter here. One is, do we get told all the gory details about the technology? And 2 is a much different question. What do we do about changing things on this planet so we can think of ourselves as Earthlings, and so we can deal with invaders from outer space? I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm not saying they're going to clobber us. I'm just saying they're here. They're doing their thing, and they don't want us to shoot them down for understandable reasons. The point here, I guess, is that everything has changed in recent years with regard to how we finally understand where we fit in the scheme of things, which is not very high on the totem pole. For a long time, the Earth is the center of the universe, and then, well, maybe it's the sun. Sorry about that, guys. Copernicus was right. Now we realize Copernicus wasn't right either. The whole solar system is moving around the center of the galaxy at 12 miles a second. Furthermore, where we used to say, well, this is the only solar system, Stan, no, it isn't. There are planets, well, Frank Drake of the SETI group used to say there might be 8,000 places in the galaxy that could send us signals. He doesn't say why they would want to send us signals, but only 8,000. Now we're talking that in our galaxy, the Milky Way alone, with maybe 200 billion stars, there may be 8 billion planets in the galaxy.
You know, Mr. Friedman, you made a very good point. 20, 30 years ago, I remember reading in science books, okay, this is basically, we're a rarity, there's no planets. And then we had the Hubble Space Telescope that would look into space where it was basically blank areas of space and it said, okay, there's nothing there, but we see stars around. Now, with the Kepler telescope, as we're able to zoom in the exact same spots where the Hubble Space Telescope would show nothing, we are not only finding stars that we couldn't see, planets. And now what is the number of the Goldilocks planets, which are the habitable zone that they say? Didn't it cross 50 or maybe even closer to that by now?
Oh, we're really talking billions. It takes, you have to understand how the Kepler works. It's in a small orbit. It goes out and comes back, covers an area of the sky as big as your fist at arm's length. And it has to make many observations to pin down the planets because it's looking at the reduction in light from the star as the planet goes by. Think of a butterfly going in front of an automobile headlight 2 miles away. That's what we're detecting, the change in intensity of the light because of the planet getting in the way, you might say. It's a remarkable device. But it takes a long time because if it takes the planet a year or 2 years or 3 years to go around the star, you got to catch it at several different points in the orbit before you can pin down how big it is and how long it takes to orbit and all that sort of stuff. It's a whole new age of discovery with new tools and better tools. But the important point is it takes us out of the center of the universe. We're not it, folks. Sorry about that. You know, that's the key thing here. And what's really amazing is the SETI people are interested in planets out there. They're not interested in anybody coming here because they know there's nobody coming here. Because if they were, they would have sent a signal and told them to be prepared for us, guys. You know, that's kind of the arrogance there. Columbus, of course, notified the Indians that he was coming, you know, set a place for 30 crew members for dinner. Utterly ridiculous. But the important thing is we have every reason to say, hey, we're not special. Well, nobody wants to say that, you understand. Who's going to fund you if you say, well, we're not special? But
Stanton,
the reality is, whereas the SETI people have not one bit of evidence that there's anybody out there sending signals that we can interpret, if you will, that's one of the crazy parts of this. We've had radios, long-distance radio, since 1901, when Marconi sent a signal from England to Newfoundland, across the ocean, even though that was supposed to be impossible. I hope everybody realizes that he was told in no uncertain terms, hey, you idiot, don't you know the Earth is round and radio waves travel in straight lines? You know, when you get past a couple 100 miles, the signal's going out into space, not coming down here. Well, it was sort of right, except that they ignored the ionosphere, which they didn't find for 20 years. Then they realized, whoops, those signals don't go straight out. They bounce off the ionosphere and can be heard around the planet. Oh, boy, something new has been added, too. But the point is, in no area of technology are we using the same technology as we did in 1901. Our computers didn't have any back then. Anything you can think of. The world has changed. Progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. To think that aliens are stuck at our just beginning level of radio transmission technology is absurd. I don't use the slide rule anymore. I did. I said that in front of a college audience, and nobody there knew what I was talking about.
Because everyone was born with computers and everything, like you said. And I know what you said about billions of planets out there, and the Kepler scope is just now finding a small bit. But like the Frank Drake equation said, that there's got to be billions, if not trillions, of planets that are in the Goldilocks zone just in this galaxy alone, I would think. I think billions is
not trillions. Not,
you don't
not
think it's trillions?
No, because I think there's only a couple 100 billion stars, so if each one had 2, that's 400 billion, not trillion.
Okay. Well, I was thinking based on
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's still a whole bunch that possibly have 10 billion years.
A slew of them, yeah.
Preston has a question to ask you real quick here.
Yeah, hi, Stanton. This is Preston.
Hi.
I think that there's enough evidence out there that UFOs are real. I think you'd agree that the evidence is at this point is mountainous, and the main problem is getting skepticism and skeptical people to look at it. And I think this is largely what is holding up progress in the field. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on why people are still skeptical and why we can't get them to take this subject seriously when it's clearly, there's the evidence there. We can't even get them to look at it.
That's if you read the SETI books, for example. They never referred to the UFO books. I read Seth Shostak's books. He's got a copy of my book on his nightstand. He said once on Coast to Coast Radio. He hadn't read it.
Right.
That's why I defeated him in a debate on Coast to Coast. He hadn't looked at the evidence, and they're all like that. The SETI community is closed-minded, and you can understand that. If aliens are visiting, why would you support an effort to listen for signals? Why not learn sign language? Talk to them. Think about that for a minute. It makes no sense.
I agree with that in the sense that we're using very primitive technology. And who's to say that that's what they'd be using? I'm sure they're getting their signals, and I'm sure they're responding back with whatever is, a more sufficient or a better way than we're using. And I think, just like you said, the silly effort to investigate SETI is not going to get us anywhere in that sense. It could be a misinformation thing for all we know, because in other words, they already have the truth. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, they know we're here, and people in government know that they're here. They're not talking. That's why I say Cosmic Watergate.
What I'd like to hear, Stan, is how you actually originally got involved in the whole UFO field, because the whole UFO field is, it's crazy right now, but back in the day when you started.
Very much by accident. It's because I'm a cheapskate. In 1958, I was working as a young nuclear physicist for General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department in Cincinnati. We had a small program going to see if you could build a nuclear-powered aircraft. Small, we only spent that year $100 million. We employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. Now, that's more, of course, than 6 professors and 12 grad students. But anyway, I was ordering books from Marlboro Books in New York, and I needed one more book so I wouldn't have to pay shipping. And I'm looking at the brochure, and there's one, the Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who had headed Project Blue Book in the early 50s. This was in 1958.
Right.
And it was $2.95 marked down to $1. So it wasn't going to cost me anything because shipping would have been $1. So it was kind of a freebie. So I ordered it, I got it, I read it. It intrigued me. I won't say it convinced me, but it intrigued me. I shared it with my neighbor, Charlie, an engineer 10 years older than I was, and he was more intrigued than I was, which impressed me because I respected Charlie. Moved to California, had a good librarian, read another dozen books, some of which were trash. If I'd read them first, I'd have never read another. And then I made the great discovery. I had my epiphany, if you will. I discovered a copy of the largest study ever done for the United States Air Force, unclassified anyway, Project Blue Book, Special Report number 14, which had data on 3,201 sightings, 240 charts, tables, graphs, and maps. I was in data heaven. But then I looked at the press release, which the guy had included with it. And here we have the Secretary of the Air Force, Donald Quarles, lying through his teeth. Now, I've worked under security, and sometimes you tiptoe around the truth. But when the Secretary of the Air Force says, quote, on the basis of this report, we believe that no objects such as those properly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. The only trouble with that statement is that the unknowns weren't 3%, they were 21.5%, and they were completely separate from the 9.3% listed as insufficient information. And yet none of the newspapers that I read with that press release in it, and there were a lot of them, bothered to check on the data. It didn't even give the title of the report. Surely some newsman would have said, hey, wait a minute, what do you mean Blue Book Special Report 14? We never heard of 1 through 13. What happened to them? Oh, they were all classified. They didn't want to say that, you know. It is truly incredible. They even didn't give the title of the report, and they didn't say who did the work, Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio. One of the dozen or so PhD theses that have been done deals with how lousy the press coverage was of UFOs. Dr. Herbert Strentz became the Dean of Journalism at Drake University. Did a whole PhD thesis at Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern. So seeing those lies, that really got to me. I don't like being lied to, especially by the Secretary of the Air Force. And so that made me determined to find out more. I joined APRO and NICAP, the two major groups at that time, to get their newsletters, talked about it at lunch with my colleagues, and I really didn't do anything about it other than the lunchtime brown bag conversation, if you will, until Frank Edwards, whom I got to know when I worked in Indianapolis on another canceled government-sponsored program,
it's been several
gave
of
me
those.
a copy of his book. Yeah, I set a record for working on more of those than anybody else. Frank sent me a copy of his book, Flying Saucers, Serious Business. By this time, I was working for Westinghouse in Pittsburgh, and I called Frank and said, hey, Frank, I'd like to get involved. You know everybody, which he did. He was a journalist. Give me some names, and I'll go public. And I thought, gee, Westinghouse nuclear physicist, those are gold-plated credentials, I thought. Well, I called KTLA Pittsburgh, the big 50,000-watt clear channel radio station, and they had a program. Would you believe the name was Contact?
Really? What year
Very
was this? The 50s still or 60s?
1968.
68. Okay.
So by this time, were you a
wait, I'm
believer?
sorry, 67 it was, 67.
By this time, Stan,
what did you ask?
By this time, would you consider yourself still skeptical of the subject, or were you pretty convinced something was going on there?
Well, I was open but skeptical. But then as I read more, I realized that I had no reason to be totally skeptical. And the funny thing is, he didn't. They had a program, but it was one of those, don't call us, we'll call you. And then less than a month later, I get a call at 6:30 to be on this program at 7 o'clock. Somebody had canceled. And I've often wondered how many people were called before he finally got me. I didn't live very far from the station. Anyway, I did the program. I was a good guy. And somebody at work at Westinghouse heard me and asked if I would speak to her book review club because they were reading Frank Edwards' book. And so my first lecture was in her living room. I did a bunch more lectures. Things happened by luck. One time, I'm riding to work. I lived downtown Pittsburgh. Westinghouse Astronuclear Lab was out of town. Riding to work with a Westinghouse supervisor, a gal named Joanne. And I'm saying, gee, I'd like to speak at Carnegie Mellon University. She said, why don't you call the dean? I said, well, I called Dr. So-and-so, and he wasn't interested. She said, Stan, the dean's my husband. He's heard you on the radio. Give him a call. So I did. And indeed, he wanted to book me. And so we arranged for a date 3 weeks later. And it was during the day, though. an assembly program at Carnegie Mellon. And the final question was, how much do you want, Stan? Well, I know I'd have to take half a day off work. How about $100? I figured he'd knock me down to 50. Sold. And then because I knew his wife, he told me what he was paying the other speakers in the series. $1,500, $1,700, $1,600.
So he got you for a bargain,
Well,
a very big bargain.
Well, he did, but what he did, the talk went extremely well, and he sent a nice letter to the agent through whom he had booked these other expensive speakers, and the agent booked me for $300 in expenses for the Engineering Society of Detroit. Hey, we're getting big time now. And what was amazing about that was that they were sold out 3 weeks in advance for 1,008 people for dinner and a talk, and there were no negative questions. That impressed the heck out of me, frankly. I mean, I was young, but these were seasoned engineers. And yeah, I drive Japanese cars, but still, the engineers in Detroit are not to be sneezed at. And I gave a bunch more talks, and then there were a couple of things that happened. One, I asked the company, I said, I need some advice here. I'd like to do more talks, but I have a wife, a child, a mortgage, I have a security clearance. I don't want to endanger any of these. So, tell me what the rules are of the game. And then a couple of days later, they came back to me with 3 rules. 1, you can identify yourself as a Westinghouse nuclear physicist. Good. Second, they told me that you can say whatever you please on your time. And third, we'd like you to give a statement at the beginning of your talk that the views you're about to hear are mine and mine alone and not those of my employer. Now, what more could you ask for? Well, as it happens, I did ask for something more, because shortly thereafter, I got a call from a colleague at Los Alamos. We both worked on nuclear rocket radiation shielding. And he said, Glenn says, Stan, how about speaking to our local American Nuclear Society chapter? Oh, I'd love to. I'm a member of the American Nuclear Society. He said, no, I mean on an expense account. Oh, well, I don't decide those things. Let me talk to management and get back to you. And I did, and they said yes. So I went to Los Alamos on a company expense account to give a lecture, Flying Saucers Are Real. And we had over 500 people, no negative questions. That impressed me as well. You begin to get the drift that I'm talking to people I have to respect. And then one final reason for becoming a full-time ufologist, which I never had anticipated. I was laid off at Westinghouse, and I talked to some people at McDonnell Douglas, and they offered me a job where my role would be to figure out how flying saucers work. Now, how's that for the ultimate? They had some money, a small percentage of the money that came in through their big project, the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, the MOLE program as it was called, could be used for blue sky stuff, high risk, high gain kind of thing. And so I'm tootling off to California, driving across the country, bring my family later, and I hear on the radio the MOLE program got canceled.
Oh, no.
I walk in 2 days later with my offer letter, and she says, we just laid off 5,000 people. Yes, I know that. So they kept me for 3 months, and I had another short-term job, and I decided I better do something I can be sure of feeding my family with. So I started trying to book lectures, and I haven't stopped since. But it was not intentional, in other words. I didn't wake up one morning and say, wouldn't it be great to be a full-time ufologist? No.
Well, look what happened. You actually became a full-time ufologist, like you said, by accident. Obviously, there's passion to it. You've uncovered some amazing cases. You've written a number of great books for all you people out there. Make sure you check him out on StantonFriedman.com, his website. You could buy any of his books there. And on top of that, you inspired, like I said, a generation of people who wanted to follow in your footsteps. Like I said earlier, you're one of my heroes. And I think that's great when you just said that one event that you spoke at where it was sold out with 1,008 people. There was not one negative question in. That just shows the media spin, where this, on one end, the media is basically saying, oh, there's nothing to this, the people are wacky, and they always profile some of the not so, good-looking stories of people, the contactee movement of the 50s. But on the other hand, you got the serious people who are actually listening and in tuned with this information. And I think you've done a great job, and I cannot wait to see what's going to come about this. Now, I also wanted to get to a couple questions, which I'm sure we're going to have to get to next hour. I'm sorry. One of the things is, over the years, we've had all these freedom of information requests. Like you said, we got all these documents, and you've showed them to me in your lectures, where you see the entire document covered in black, and all you see is the date and maybe a couple words, and it's pathetic. I don't even know why they would release them. But nonetheless, I think there's been a shift, because a lot of the people who were retired and the elite of that time realized, well, if we're still in the government and we have all this information and people are, screaming and crying, saying, give us the information we deserve, I think that possibly a lot of this information or technology for that matter, has been taken out of government hands and was put in private corporations who don't have to answer to the American public. What do you think about that?
It's possible, but remember, we've had loads of secret programs, lots of money being spent in secret, where the government's still running the show. On the other hand, my book, Top Secret Magic, goes into the validity of 3 important Majestic 12 documents dating back to the 50s, 47 and 52. And whether Majestic 12 still exists, probably not by that name, but there's another body there. You set up a separate outfit so there's plausible deniability. And so, it may well be that there is, quote, a secret government. It's kind of funny. The National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, they're the big guys on the block when it comes to these huge satellites. You can read the license plates in the parking lot at the Kremlin, that sort of thing. And the NRO admitted, 3 years ago or so, that they hadn't had any luck. They had a big contract with Boeing to try to improve the architecture of the satellites, more bang for the pound or something. And it wasn't successful, so they canceled the program. They'd only spent about $5 billion. Just trying to improve that one thing. But many people have never even heard of the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, for those who haven't. It's hard to draw the line between secret and nobody knows about it and a separate outfit that nobody really knows about.
Like you said, the NRO, there's the DIA. I think there's over 50, if correct me if I'm wrong, probably even more of these little 2 or 3, agencies, 2 or 3 letter agencies, FBI, DIA, NOI, was it Navy, Office of Intelligence. There's just so many of those, and in some ways, they don't even fully communicate to one another, do they?
Oh, no, they don't. No, that's one of the rules of the game, really, is that, a lot of people have the wrong impression that if you have a top secret clearance, you get access to everything that's top secret. Not so. There's the question of need to know. And I ran across that. I was working on radiation shielding for nuclear airplanes. I couldn't get access to the Navy's work on radiation shielding for a nuclear submarine. Had the right clearance, didn't have the need to know. So that's part of the game. That's how you try to keep the spies away, by reducing the number of people with access. And of course, sometimes we goof, There are spies and have been spies, including in the atom bomb program and so forth. But the kicker here is we have grown up in a society that has accepted the notion that secrets can be kept, should be kept, will be kept, and that you won't get access to them. And, there's the black budget programs and the open programs. When I was working on nuclear airplanes, our work was secret restricted data. But it said Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department on the door at General Electric. There are other programs whose very existence is classified. And that's a whole other ball game. How are you going to find out about that? It ain't easy, I'll guarantee you. I've been to 20 archives. I've looked at lots of paper, and some of it is, like you say, blacked out, whited out, unavailable. And sometimes there's a procedure for getting access, mandatory classification review. And sometimes it takes 6 years to get a response. Not exactly open government.
That's an understatement of the world. You know, Robert Schaefer was saying, oh, the secrets wouldn't be kept from people, this and that. Well, what about the Manhattan Project, is what Blake Cousins said when we spoke to him last night. And he says, well, people knew that there was a weapon in disguise. Well, what about the stealth bomber? What about the U-2? What about the Blackbird? All those these are just what we know of. And you were working on classified projects that most of them never came to light. Nonetheless, they were all done in secret. And yes, there are spies. But that doesn't mean that people don't know. And I mean, that doesn't mean that people don't know that there's being a secret kept from them. And Robert Schaefer is fully believes that even though there's a secret, that we still know about it. And I don't buy that. That's just a terrible thing. Just like you say with the noisy negativists. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind is made up.
Let me give you an example. The Corona spy satellite was our first successful spy satellite. First flew in 1960, and in its first launch, it got more data than all the U-2 flights which had preceded it, because it's going round and round, a lot of opportunities. And they worked out a whole new way of getting the data back. They deorbited the data package, and airplanes came along and caught the package. As crazy as that sounds, it worked. Now, the first public discussion was not in 1961 to say, we got the Russians this time. It was 1995. Secrets can't be kept. Only the people who don't have access to them say they can't be kept. That's one of the things that helps keep secrets around Washington, is people who think that if that were true, I would know about it because I'm important. And because I'm important, I would know about it. David Susskind, who was a television talk show host, I was on the show. He says between segments, I read the New York Times. There's nothing there that says
Friedman,
these things are real.
We gotta pick this up after the commercial break. All you listeners out there, tune in. Make sure you stay on. And we are going for a commercial break. We're coming right back with the Godfather of Ufology. Stay tuned in at freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
What are we supposed to do?
I'm gonna fight, because I'm used to it. The rest of you are gonna have a tougher choice. And look, I don't want to sell it to you. It's too ugly for that. And it's ugly, and it's hard. But when you're fighting in your own backyard, you're fighting for your family, it all hurts a little less and it makes a little more sense. But for us, this is our home. Even the tiniest flea can drive your big dog crazy. So the first thing we have to do is learn how to work together. Become a unit. And that's gonna take some time. So we're gonna have to evolve. Rewire our reflexes. Learn new skills and adapt old ones. So we'll find people we can trust. Friends with their ears to the ground who can help us get the things we need to fight back. Watch what they do. Study their tactics, their routines. The more we know, the easier it will be to hurt them. But we'll need to be smart, and we'll need to be patient. We'll hit them on our terms. When we're good and ready. We inherited our freedom. Now it's up to all of us to fight for it.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, where the fight begins and information never sleeps.
Now you can share the topics that drive the discussions of your favorite talk shows with TalkStream Live's topic-driven talk radio. List and promote real-time talk radio topics, or post the topics that you want to hear. Hot topics are tweeted and retweeted and include simple click-to-listen audio links. The future of talk radio is topic-driven talk radio. Available now at TalkStreamLive.com.
Intuitive improvisation is the secret of genius.
I want to break free.
Oh, I see.
I put my pants on.
So,
just like the rest of you, one leg at a time.
I guess I'll have to watch.
Guess what? I got a fever. And the only prescription is more Jacker.
Uh-huh.
I turned cities into salt.
Oh, okay.
You gotta come work for me.
Right. Uh-huh.
I could get you in now. You love it. Nobody tells you when to go to bed.
You want to call in, sure.
All day, all night.
If you want to fight or you got something more important.
You eat all the ice cream you want.
I'll take that, too.
You're talking to me all wrong. It's the wrong tone.
I'm not adding all these people. I don't know all these people.
Is there anybody out there?
So, oh, I see. Right. Yeah, I'm challenged.
Changing reality.
Where life is beautiful.
The hijacker.
Monday through Thursday at midnight. Be there. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning.
We are far stronger than we were 10 weeks ago.
Zero corners, all hands at your battle stations.
You're nervous, not your toes. I'll do the mastermind around here.
You who have not seen it do not know what hell looks like from the top.
Bam, check it out every Tuesday and Saturday on Revolution Radio. It's a double dose of the internationally recognized renegade military historian Douglas Dietrich.
You'll stay right where you are until I tell you to move out.
Yeah, that's right. Tuesdays from 10 to midnight Eastern Time. Join Douglas Dietrich as he exposes the truth in hidden history on his show Critical Omissions. And then our human weapon of mass destruction is back once again to take your calls on Saturday Night Firing Lines. Both from 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Only on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Revolution. Radio. listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
That's right, folks. You heard it. We are back on the air, and we are continuing with Mr. Stanton Friedman, the Godfather of Ufology. Before we bring him back to talk about a few things, let's mention what is going to happen again next week. We said this is the first hour. We want to say it again. First of all, we have the category, the contest. We have two categories. We'd like to see some great footage from all you out there. Even if you want to remain anonymous, that's fine. Just get us the footage, and we'll get you the book. You can send it to wherever you are. You don't have to mention your name. Or if you do want to talk about it, interview the event that got you to witness this amazing whatever footage you have, we would like to have that as well. But again, if you want to be anonymous, we'll respect that. There are two categories. First, we want to get amazing footage of a UFO. It could be stills, preferably video, but nonetheless, we want everything that you guys have, put it out there. We'll show it to the world at Third Phase of Moon. The second category, again, is with regards to entities. If you guys have any captured amazing footage of pics or footage of entities, ghosts, aliens, you name it. If you got it, send it to us at Third Phase of Moon. Spell out third phase, THIRDPHASE of Moon, at Skype or Facebook. And remember, next week we have Dr. Roger Lear on the 30th, March 30th. We're going to pick up again on April 13th. April 6th, Lorian Fenton's going to be coming from the Fenton Report. And on the 13th, we're trying to build a show, but we want to know what you listeners out there want. Do you want another top ufologist? Do you want a famous hypnotherapist? Do you want another person who knows about abductions? You let us know. Skype us here while we're on air. Call in at area code 347-688-2902. Or you could even email me, and make sure you put in the subject line, Revolution Radio. And it's John, John, at Rome Productions, ROAM. Remember, Rome is Researchers on a Mission. And other than that, also don't forget the Cousins brothers out there. They are working real hard at Third Phase of Moon to get everything going in. And with them, with their great effort, they're actually bringing all this amazing footage out to everybody. So don't forget about that contest. We'd like to get your input. We'd like to get of what you guys want in the coming shows, and we'd also like to get the amazing footage that you guys will win in those two categories. And without further ado, me and Preston are bringing back the Godfather of Ufology. Mr. Friedman, you here?
I'm here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's kind of pick up where we left off. But, in between the commercials, we were talking about something that very important is coming up that we mentioned last hour. Mr. Stephen Bassett is running the security or the citizens hearing, which is going to take place at the end of April. A test of former military brass and former government agents are going to be testifying to former members of Congress at the National Press Club. And this is another effort on his part to get disclosure to happen. Mr. Friedman, what do you think is going to have this impact? Because we've had Dr. Edgar Mitchell and so many other people that have already spoken out, and it seems that we've been stalled. Do you think this effort is going to be as futile as those efforts, or you think we're actually going to make some progress?
Well, I'm going to be there in person. I'll be one of the people testifying, even though I haven't had a sighting and I haven't been in the military. But I do have a unique distinction. I'm the only one of the 12 scientists who provided congressional testimony in 1968, on my birthday, July 29th, who is still around. There's an excellent report that was put out, the proceedings of that symposium put out by the Congressional Committee on Space and Aeronautics. And best paper was by Dr. James E. McDonald, a professor of physics at University of Arizona. And Jim talked to over 500 UFO witnesses, and in his paper he talked about the 41 best cases. And anybody who says there aren't any good cases has to say, well, except for all those good ones that people like McDonald and Hynek and so forth published. So, and it's listed on my website, www.stantonfriedman.com. But I think this is going to last a whole week. And, it'll be at the National Press Club. And the whole point is to get the press to pay attention. This is Washington, D.C. there are plenty of press people around. And I don't know all the guys who are going to be speaking. I understand about 20, but 5 days of testimony. And I will be providing a PowerPoint presentation and stuff like that. And they're going to film this and try to make a movie out of it and stuff. I think they're going to have such a variety of people that surely there's going to be somebody that the press can pick up on. Now, I don't know who the committee members are. It's going to be sort of a pseudo-congressional committee, supposedly former congressmen, because there were these hearings in '68, and there were actually some hearings earlier in '66 because of Congressman Ford. There were those sightings up in Michigan, and he pushed to have those. But those were rather closed, and the Secretary of the Air Force, and it wasn't open to scientific stuff. And so I'm looking forward to this. I will have to write down my thoughts and submit them and all that sort of thing. But I'm hoping that because times have changed, I mean, that's what, 44 years or so ago, 45 years ago, there's been an enormous change in the attitude towards spaceflight. Those hearings were before we landed on the moon.
And like you said it, times have changed dramatically. This new generation is open to it. All the people I ask, you know, do you believe life out there? You got some people who say yes, some people no. Do you believe that the possibility of life exists? Every answer is yes now because of what the Kepler is telling it. Now, I heard an interesting comment that unless it comes from a government source or a police officer, for instance, if the president of the United States, a senator, or a police officer say something only on the news, is it to be believed as a fact? In other words, if no one else says it, it's not going to get anywhere. And that's what's sad, because you're testifying and you have such mountainous evidence, as Preston said. You have so much enormous information to contribute. And if people just listen, if they just stop this "don't bother me with the facts, my mind is made up" attitude and actually look at the actual evidence, then their minds should be changed because of what's there. You can't deny this evidence. And I'm really hoping that this citizens hearing does work.
So too, and there's another part of it. It's not just the information about sightings and radar visual cases and multiple witness cases and landing physical trace cases and abduction cases, but there's another whole side to this thing, and that is the technology. Because most often the arguments from the noisy negativists are, you can't get here from there, Friedman, don't you understand that? And the fact of the matter is you can get here from there, and not on a bicycle. But in my book, Science Was Wrong, Kathleen Marden and I, we each did 7 chapters. We have many instances of when smart people said stupid things that stood in the way of progress. One of them was by the top astronomer in the country. If there's one thing he's certain of, is that man will never fly any distance in a vehicle. This was 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight. The English astronomer Royal in 1956 said space travel is utter bilge. Who would pay for it? What good would it do? What we need is better instruments for astronomy. Well, because of the space program, astronomy has benefited greatly. But these are just 2 of many, many examples of stupid things said by smart people. But the kind of thing I'm talking about, people don't seem to understand that nuclear fusion, which is what makes all the stars work, it's not a local phenomena. Yeah, it goes on in H-bombs, too. We've learned to do that much. That's what you'd expect from us earthlings, you know, this primitive society. But the technical arguments don't hold up, even when couched by professors. You know, I try a little experiment when I'm on campuses. Often I'm asked to do a little colloquium in the afternoon, you know, before the evening lecture. And sometimes I hear from the students that, oh, Professor so-and-so is going to show that what you're saying is baloney, you know. Yeah. So I make sure I talk about things that I know they don't know anything about. I'll draw a diagram of an electromagnetic submarine. You're all familiar with this, aren't you? Of course, nobody is. I draw a diagram of a nuclear rocket engine. I worked on them. They do work. You're all familiar with this. Of course, none of them are. But then I get a little sneaky. I say, what's 1G? What's the numerical value of 1G? Because you'll always hear that the gravitational loadings would be much too high. It'd be smashed against the walls. You'd never survive, blah, blah, blah. So they all shout out 9.8 meters per second squared. I said, that's right, but can you put it in terms that would relate to, say, a Corvette? And they look at me like I'm talking Swahili. That's 21 miles an hour per second. That's 1G acceleration. So if you accelerate at 1G for 3 seconds, you're going 63 miles an hour, and you had a pretty hot car, because usually it takes 4, 5, 6 seconds. Then I ask, what's the speed of light? 300,000 kilometers per second. I say, again, put it in units that people can understand. It turns out that's 670 million miles an hour. And Jupiter's around 500 million miles away, so it gives you some gauge of that. But then I say, here's the key question. Multiple choice. How long does it take at 1G acceleration to get to the speed of light? 1,000 years, 100 years, 10 years, or what? How many think it's 1,000?
Mr. Friedman, it looks like we got Blake Cousins, the third phase of Moon. The guy is responsible. We're working real hard with his brother to broadcast the information to the world that he just got on, and he'd like to join in on this conversation and ask you some great questions.
Sure.
Blake, are you out there? You here live on radio, Revolution Radio?
I'm right here, John, Dr. John Elias. This is absolutely fascinating, and we love to have Stanton Friedman on the show. He is a wealth of information. I want to ask you, Stanton, what about the universe is huge. We just found out it's 80 million years older than we expected from the Big Bang. So, we got to get to planets, and we got to get there fast. Maybe propulsion might not be the way. Maybe it is the way. What do you believe? What do you think about folding space?
Well, it's a nice idea. I tell people, take a sheet of paper, and you're a fly. You want to get from one corner to the diagonally opposite corner. You crawl across, shortest distance between 2 points, a straight line. If you could get somebody to fold the paper corner to corner, gee, you get there in an awful hurry. But I don't know how to do that, and propulsion works fine. The answer to my question was it only takes 1 year at 1G to get close to the speed of light. And people want half an Einstein. Speed of light's the limit. Oh, I forgot. I don't want to tell you that as you get close to the speed of light, time slows down for things moving that fast. So at 99.9% of the speed of light, and the particles in that big accelerator go 99.9999% of the speed of light, but at a mere 99.9% of the speed of light, you can go 37 light years distance in 6 months. Pilot time. Pilot time. You go out, come back, marry your granddaughter's best friend, and so forth. That's reality. So propulsion, I worked on a fusion propulsion scheme back in 1961. And it allows you to kick particles out the back end of a rocket that have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. 10 million times as much. And that's what we know already with less than 200 years of technology behind us. I'm not saying we won't be able to full warp space and time, all that stuff. But I'm saying we already know how to do it with propulsion systems. And the people who say it can't be done don't know anything about those advanced systems. It's really crazy. They're speaking out when total ignorance.
Do you think it's wise for the U.S. to step aside and let private enterprise, for the space race? What if China were to send a man to Mars, claim it as their own, and call it the red planet of China? Would that be possible, and could they claim it as their own once they stuck their Chinese flag onto the land of Mars?
There have been international conventions about, the moon doesn't belong to anybody, and I presume that holds for other planets. I think getting the private industry involved would be a good idea, because as I look around, look at computers. If the government were doing it, you'd have your choice of 4. They'd all be 1,000 times less good than our present ones. They'd all cost a lot of money, and everybody would be happy, but I wouldn't be. The right to fail is an important part of capitalism, and you can see it. You need a nudge. You need an excuse for working harder, to do better, to do differently. And I would like to see private industry involved. And they're getting there slowly, Branson and Bigelow and the other guys. I think they can add a great deal to the subject. What bothers me, frankly, I worked on the space program. And all of us who were working there back in the 60s thought that we would have a base on the moon by now. that we would have gone to Mars by now. We haven't, because there hasn't been any leadership. The nuclear Navy had Admiral Rickover, who decided, that's where we're going, folks. You don't want to go there, get off the ship. And we have nuclear submarines. We have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers because there was leadership. NASA hasn't had a goal since Kennedy enunciated one of getting a man to the moon and back by the end of the decade. Incidentally, there's a good example of how progress comes from doing things differently. A Canadian astronomer in 1941 calculated the required initial launch weight of a rocket able to get a man to the moon and back, because the science fiction writers were talking about going to the moon, and he thought that's absurd. So he did the calculations, published a paper. It would have to weigh, at launch, 1 million tons. He made every possible stupid assumption about how you go about doing it. He assumed a single-stage rocket, a limit of 1G acceleration, and a whole bunch of other things. Our Apollo, the Saturn V, which took us to the moon, weighed all of 3,000 tons at orbit. So if you make stupid assumptions, you can go from 3,000 to 1 million. There is no need for us to make stupid assumptions. Let's do it right, guys. But the leadership, I worked on several programs that desperately needed a Rickover, and that didn't have them, and the programs got canceled. Takes guts.
As far as the government's concerned about telling the public what they're up to, do you think if they had a base on Mars or the moon, for that matter, would they tell us? And should we trust the government for everything that they tell us?
No, we shouldn't, of course, because we have many examples of where they didn't tell us the truth. I don't know that we have a base on the moon or Mars. I can't say it's impossible. It would be a tremendous undertaking, cost a lot of money, take a lot of leadership, and that's where I'm dubious. Do we have anybody who's got enough leadership to do such a thing in private, quietly, in secret? And I don't want the government to tell us everything it knows about everything. I don't think that's appropriate. It certainly should be telling us the planet's being visited.
Mr. Friedman, I agree with you there in the sense that you said that we have national security concerns, and if the government was to release all the information, in essence, they would be releasing some information that would ruin or put harm in national security. But I see, so I agree with you that it'd be foolish for them to release all the information. I just really hope soon they release the most important information to tell us at least that we're not alone.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd also like to see the Roswell UFO crash. I mean, the wreckage. I think that we deserve to see that in a museum one day. And I'm very curious, Stanton, what you think about the current state of Roswell, and like things like Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, in which he states that the Roswell technology has been reverse engineered.
Well, I have, on my website, you'll find an article about fraud and ufology, and I talk about Bob Lazar and Colonel Corso. I met Colonel Corso, but he said some things that were definitely not true, especially about himself. He signed a sworn statement that he was a member of the President's National Security Council. It's about as high as you can get. And when I checked with the Eisenhower Library, they had information about Colonel Corso, but he was never a member of the council, and he never attended a meeting. They sent me a letter. I sent it to the attorney that he had sworn the statement to. Don't you think we ought to take that out of there? He was asked. He said no. He took credit for introducing it to industry, stuff that a guy got a Nobel Prize for work done 2 years before he was working for Dr. Trudeau, General Trudeau in the Army. So he does not have a high level of accuracy as far as I am concerned, unfortunately. And there are a lot of people around like that. They tell stories. People believe them or not as they choose. It's a longer story. Like I said, it's an article on my website that gets into that.
Have you ever considered just moving to the United States, getting your United States citizenship, and run for president of the United States?
Hey, I was born in the United States. I'm still an American citizen. I'm also a citizen of Canada. I'm a dual citizen. I only did that after the U.S. changed the law. It used to be that if you took anybody else's citizenship, you'd lose your American. And since I was earning most of my living in the United States, and if you're not a citizen, going back and forth across the border is a real pain and all that. But somebody took the U.S. government to court, good example here, and won. And so they changed it so that now the only way you can lose your American citizenship is if you, A, publicly renounce it, and B, fight in somebody else's army against the United States, which is being a traitor. And I haven't done either of those. So when I go to the United States, I'm an American. When I come home, I'm a Canadian. When I go overseas, I'm a Canadian, because they don't talk about ugly Canadians. We're not a threat to anybody.
So we got to get you on the ballot for the next presidential race, I think.
I agree.
I'm 78. I think that's a little old.
There's no discrimination here. You know, it's all about the brain and the. I think. Look, Stanton, if there was a spaceship right now that could go light speed, we could get to Mars very quickly and some of these outer planets in our solar system. Would you be the first on board to get on that ship and start exploring the universe and our galaxy
I'd probably have to pass a number of tests that I couldn't pass physiologically and so forth. And it's no big deal. I mean, if you want to spend the money, getting to the planets is not a big deal. It costs money and effort, and people, these things don't happen easily. That's why I mentioned that when we were working on nuclear airplanes, we employed 3,500 people. We spent $100 million in 1958, which was a lot of money. And we are not flying nuclear airplanes around as far as I can tell. So, we can get to the stars. It's a question of having purpose and drive and reason. The Apollo program didn't come cheap either, but we did it. The nuclear navy wasn't cheap. It was worthwhile.
When you talk about nuclear airplanes, can you describe to us what they look like? Is it kind of like, can we imagine an aircraft carrier the size of these large ships on the ocean being up in the skies?
No, you don't need that. You take a regular airplane, and instead of burning jet fuel to make hot gas, which you put out through the turbine, you put it out the back, the plane goes forward, you get thrust from, Newton's law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. There were two different approaches, one by General Electric and one by Pratt Whitney. In one, the General Electric, you would run air through a reactor, run it through the compressor into the reactor to get heated to about 1,800 degrees, and exhaust it through the turbine, and you got a jet engine going. And you have two of these, and the airplane will run for years. Kind of neat. Unlimited range, you might say. There was a nuclear ramjet that was worked on. Of course, its only purpose would be to deliver nuclear bombs. It'd be launched on board a B-52, and it could fly anywhere. So the fact that you don't need to burn fuel, something which you throw away basically, is an enormous advantage. It's just like, can you imagine operating an aircraft carrier for 20 years without refueling? That's incredible, but it's true. We do it. It took some money. It took great leadership from Admiral Rickover, but we do it.
With threats around the world and nuclear, energy being created, and even threats from North Korea, and the U.S., response saying, we're going to step up our missile defense system. Do you think that's wise, or should we just take action right now?
I'm not going to play a politician on this. My thing is action first, talk later, but that's an old-fashioned viewpoint. Look, if the planet wanted to, we could do all kinds of good things that we're not doing for the people on the planet. And I'm not going to try to second-guess all the politicians, although they need it, frankly. But, and I think we'll see. England, for example, has decided, I guess we better build another nuclear power reactor. For those who think solar and wind will do the job, incidentally, it ain't the case. It's very expensive, and I hate to say this, but the wind doesn't blow all the time. The sun doesn't shine all the time. So you need a backup system that does work, and so it gets very expensive to have the backup and the other means of doing things.
Do you think it'll ever be possible to build nuclear reactors without the hazard of, radiation?
Well, a nuclear reactor, by definition, the fission process produces neutrons and gamma rays, which are a pain in the butt. You got to do something about them. So, if you burn gasoline, you have a noxious exhaust. It's the price you pay. Everything has its, its negatives, if you will. When you got horses in New York, they hired an awful lot of people to clean up the streets from the residue from the horses. Good sense will prevail, and nuclear's got a damn good record, incidentally. And one of the amazing things about the Apollo program is that having 3 guys get killed in an accident didn't stop the program. It takes courage. You don't always win, but you want to move forward. That's where leadership comes in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the unexpected, we move onward. That's supposed to be the American way, but it hasn't looked like it over the last several years.
What do you think is going to be the future of the whole UFO situation and the cover-up? I mean, the cover-up can't go on forever.
Well, it probably can. I think the biggest part of the future will be when the press will get off its butt and start recognizing they've got a story here. If major newspapers, for example, would seek out reports that are more than, let's say, 25 years old from former military people, they'd be flooded if they'd guarantee anonymity or protection. Why can't the government grant amnesty in advance? They say there's nothing to flying saucers. Fine. Let's say you will not punish anybody for telling about the experience he had while in the military more than 25 years ago. And that's a challenge. How about it, government? You say there's nothing to it? Show us.
I agree with that. That I'm sure people have died. There's speculation that James Forrestal, one of the first Majestic 12 members, was killed, and there's also speculation that other people have died trying to keep this a secret. So I think you're right. There needs to be amnesty for those to come out, and there was actually some other member. I think Bob Dean and also Jim Sparks also said that as well. That needs. Basically, what needs to happen to get those people out there. Now, I want to ask you another question. What do you think all the listeners that are seeing this, or hearing this, and all the viewers that will eventually be seeing this down the line on Third Phase Moon, what do you think we all can do to get this going, aside from the citizens hearing or that's happening? What can we do to push it?
Well, you can talk to the talk show hosts. You can talk to the local newspapers. And I was doing a radio show out of Seattle, and a woman said, I haven't heard, I'm sure there aren't many sightings around here. I said, I'll tell you what, if you ask your audience to call in with their sightings, I'll bet you'll be swamped with reports. I don't think so, she said. Well, try it. The rest of the program, she was swamped with reports. So it's overcoming the notion that nobody cares, that nothing's happening, there's no data. Put it to the trial. It's just like America's Most Wanted. What are the chances of catching that criminal? Well, small, but they caught an awful lot. If you got enough people looking, cast a big enough net, in other words. And I think that's what we need to do, an organized effort that says, hey, tell us. We'll listen. We won't reveal your name. I had a case in California. Get a call on a Monday about something they'd seen Sunday over Los Angeles. At 9 o'clock in the evening in March. This is when I lived out there more than 30 years ago. Got a call the next night. They'd gotten my name from my number from the Griffith Observatory. Somebody else, when I looked at the map, they'd obviously seen the same bright red light over the city of Los Angeles. So I called the local paper, got them to run an article in which I gave my address, my phone number, said I wouldn't use names without permission. I'd sure like to hear from anybody else who might have seen something. And I didn't give a lot of details about what the people reported. I heard from 30 different people Many of them had tried to report it to the cops. "What are you drinking, lady?" was the response in one case.
Oh, of course.
And fortunately, one person had binoculars and saw that it was a candle in a cleaning bag, a plastic balloon, if you will. Another saw it land on the Wilshire Country Club lawn, and I talked to the fire chief, and he wasn't about to go public because every kid in the neighborhood was going to try to duplicate that. Nobody gave wild discussions about what was going on. It was a great test of the fact that people are pretty good observers. They can't always interpret what they see. If you seek the information and provide a safe climate, like the cops saying, we want to hear, I asked the RCMP here in Canada. I said, when you put out a big noise about you'd really like to find out more about some terrible event that happened, any witnesses and so forth, please call, etc. I said, do you get a lot of response? And the RCMP guy said, we get tons. What percentage is useful? Well, 3 or 4%, but that's how we solve most crimes. So you got to be like the guy who wants to hire or the basketball coach who wants to get a 7-footer. Yes, most people aren't 7 feet tall. So what? Give me one. That's all. And it's the same thing here. You're not looking for every story to be true. It won't be. Not every isotope is fissionable.
We just need one.
Physicists use the ones. That's right. Use the one that is.
We just need one case. That's it. And there's thousands that can be used. And like Preston said earlier, I think we deserve the right to see the Roswell wreckage in a museum someday and be really shown all that. But like you said, that key word for everybody out there listening is one. We get the media to actually cover one story. But how are we going to get Clearwater, Clear Channel, or any of those other big things to actually listen to us and not throw in noisy negativists to try to counter everything that you say or Dr. Edgar Mitchell says? But we got to get them to get that one.
Well, that's right. Incidentally, I will be in Roswell July 5th, 6th, 7th this year is the annual festival. There'll be thousands of people there. It'll be a ball.
I've never been to the Roswell Festival, although I would love to go sometime.
But you can get there. It's a nice town, 50,000 people, warm. In the summer, it's hot, I would say.
The sad thing is the media portrays, when they cover it. They just cover the costume contest, the parade, but they're not really giving it a real, with the seriousness it deserves. That's the problem.
There will be other professionals. I'll be giving, I think, 3 lectures, and there will be other scientists who will be there. And look, one of the 12 PhD theses is about how bad the press coverage is. It's time the press took up the challenge and look at itself in the mirror and say, how about playing it straight, guys? Isn't it about time? You'd be amazed what would happen.
If you were to rank the top 3 cases, what would you say are the top 3 most important cases that we can actually use to get to this?
That's like asking a mother, which of your 9 kids is your favorite? What?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, the cases, obviously, I like the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, as reported in my book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, done mostly by Betty's niece, Kathleen Martin, who had all the hypnosis tapes and so forth. It's a very well-documented case, and especially because of Dr. Benjamin Simon, the psychiatrist who did the hypnosis. If you want an expert on shell-shock war veterans, at PTSD, we call it now, post-traumatic stress disorder, that was Dr. Simon. He ran a hospital, 3,000 beds for people with PTSD coming out of World War II. He wrote, there's an Army movie, Let There Be Light, starring Dr. Simon, how he got these people back to the living, if you will. He didn't know anything about flying saucers. He knew a very great deal about helping people recover memory of missing time, of reintegrating into their personality, something that was difficult and scary and so forth that happened to them. The Roswell case is great. I like one of my favorite cases, and everybody's got their top 10, the RB-47 case. in the late 50s, a reconnaissance bomber flying over the Gulf of Mexico, a very highly trained crew of 6 members with all kinds of surveillance instrumentation. They saw a UFO. It circled around them, which is a neat trick when you're going 450 miles an hour. They picked up the object on radar. They radioed the ground. The ground picked up them and the object. This case lasted an hour. It's one of Jim McDonald's cases. And he tracked down all 6 of the military witnesses. And it's an incredible case. He even wrote an article that appeared in his scientific journal. So that's the kind of thing. Multiple witness, radar visual, long duration. It's the kind of case that the noisy negativists have real troubles with. Now, I'll admit my University of Chicago classmate, Carl Sagan, when I brought it up, oh, well, that was spoofing, Stan. That's where you create a target that isn't really there by using clever radar techniques. I said, Carl, there were visual sightings for an hour. Oh, I'll have to think about that again. The standard rule is whatever explanation you come up with is better than reality as long as it shows anything but alien.
What do you think of the Phoenix Lights case? You know, where thousands of people saw that?
Excellent case. There's an example where the press didn't do its job and where the governor didn't come out until later. I was on the Larry King show when he finally came out, the Symington of Arizona. Excellent case. Multiple witnesses, lasted 15 minutes or so. Rather extraordinary behavior. This huge thing, almost a mile wide, moving slowly across the sky, making no sound and blotting out the sky. It was a beautiful, clear night. Seen by loads and loads of people. And we got a bait and switch on that. Somebody filmed a National Guard or Reserve airplane dropping battlefield flares, different part of town, different time. And yet when the media were covering it, that's what they showed all the time, was those stupid flares instead of what was seen. So it's an excellent case.
Do you think that,
what?
This whole confusion with the flares, do you think that was an intentional part of a cover-up? Because I understand Luke
Yes.
Air Force Base, really released a lot of contradictory statements and had a lot of problems dealing with this whole situation.
Yeah, I think it was intentional. Like I said, anything but alien. And as long as the press doesn't do its job to track down the facts, to do it right, would you send a guy who's never seen a cricket match to cover it on national television? I don't think so. At least they can read a book or two or study the evidence. I'll give them a free lecture.
Speaking of national television, what if, hypothetically, CNN, ABC, all the main broadcasters were in their helicopters surrounding a flying saucer flying over New York, let's say. And this was broadcast around the world. Contact has been made. There's something in the air. We don't know what it is. Look at this craft. We're filming it. Everybody's watching it live around the world. What do you think at that moment in time, what would happen from there on after? What people would think? Would governments collapse? Would people go to war?
I don't think governments would collapse. I don't think they'd collapse. I think some religions might have a problem. The Jerry Falwells of the world, if you will, and Pat Robertsons and so forth, because they would have to admit they'd been wrong all this time, and they don't want to do that. No, I think the public can handle it. Look, after 700 lectures, I don't think I've scared anybody. I've educated them. I've stimulated them. But I haven't given them horrible thoughts. I've tried to bring a reasoning to the story. Look, we've learned to live through the nuclear age. That's pretty darn scary when you think about it. But the world didn't collapse because we had leadership who reassured us that it's okay. And to me, one of the most remarkable things of the last 65 years or so is that nuclear weapons haven't been used on people in that time. That's really remarkable.
Do you think it's possible that the U.S. government might themselves pull off a grand hoax of possible being a visitation from another planet? Like put up a hologram up in the air, say this is what it is?
Yeah, the false flag notion, you get people going by putting something that isn't real and, we told you so. you suckers who believe anything. The government could do that. They'd be in great danger of being kicked out of office for doing something like that. Again, it's a question of leadership. And, there was a point in time when Nixon was president, it looked like the government was going to be releasing things. They did the movie UFO Cover-Up Live. They were asked, two guys who had done television programs for the Republican Party, were told to do the movie using only government people and stuff, and they'd have access to film of UFOs at Holloman. That was dropped. But the government had spent money. They put a lot of effort into it. I was on the program. But it turns out Watergate came along. That was not... See, Nixon could do what he pleased once he'd been reelected with a 2-term limit. Those presidents are in a good position to take giant steps, if you will. But it doesn't seem to have happened again, does it?
Well, look at when Kennedy was shot, and this Zapruder film was suppressed, for 14 years. It came out on Geraldo Night Live, some night show Geraldo had. 14 years later, the Zapruder film. So they cover these things up. It takes a long time before the government wants to disclose what they know, obviously. What is it going to take? Like, we want to get CNN to film something, or at least I'm sure they know things that they're covering up. They're not going to show us things that they film, probably because CNN's probably government affiliated. There's some kind of agenda that they're pulling off. What do you think about?
One of the big things is fear of ridicule. When I check my audiences at the end of my lectures, I find that typically 10% of them believe they've seen a flying saucer. But when I ask, how many of you reported what you saw, 90% put their hands down. And when they come to my table, they got to tell me their story. Did you report it? No. Why not? They think I was some kind of a nut. The fear of ridicule is a very important aspect of this, even though the people aren't going to ridicule. I know, I've been out there. I stuck my neck way out, all over the place. And I've had 11 hecklers in over 700 lectures, and 2 of them were drunk. And the audience took care of the rest. Facts triumph over nonsense.
Blake, I know you had some more comments and some questions to ask him. Do you want to jump in, or do you want me to go on with this amazing question that I wanted to get back to Mr. Friedman?
Go ahead, Don. Go ahead.
Okay. If you were the ambassador to yourself, if you were an ambassador to another nation, what would you do to persuade another nation to disclose? That way the U.S. has to follow step.
Since everybody seems to owe the U.S. something, I think it would be very, very difficult. Maybe enough food to feed your people for 6 months.
Yeah.
Now, I think, remember, when I talk about cover-up, the cosmic Watergate, it's an international problem. It's not just the United States. The reasons are clear. You want to figure out how they work. You worry about the political implications. You worry about the economic implications, the religious implications. We don't have a lot of leaders out there who are ready to stand up and be counted, recognizing there'll be some flack, but that goes with the territory. I have to give General Eisenhower credit for having, once the U-2 got shot down, Gary Powers U-2, and people were saying, oh, it's just blown off course, just a accident, sorry about that, guys. When Khrushchev then showed Gary Powers and the camera, Ike stood up and said, yes, it's ours. It's a spy plane. We need to know what's happening in the Soviet Union because it's such a closed society. We can not afford to be surprised again in the future. That took courage, but he had it.
Now, we, as the U.S. government, we were a superpower, especially with the Soviet Union, the 2 superpowers of the world. Then the Soviet Union collapsed, and we became pretty much the largest empire, running the world. Then something started to happen where there was this amazing rise of China. And then we started fighting the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and people started to hate the U.S. And you have people who started defying us, such as Chavez before he passed away, Fidel Castro, Putin even for that matter. And I've heard rumors that the president of Iran and even Chavez himself before he passed away were actually threatening to release their cover-up. They wanted it out of the cover-up because it was too costly for them. And that's what I'm thinking might kind of happen. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting thought. I don't know. That is a very interesting possibility. What if somebody with guts stood up and said, and told the other powers that, look, you guys don't put it on the table, we will. What would happen? I don't know. They call it blackmail in some places, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what's going to happen because we're at a point now where I think the whole cover-up is very volatile. I just can't see it going on as it is. I mean, do you think MJ-12 is still active then, actively covering up
Not
cases?
by the same name, but by another name, of course. You need somebody to act as the central collection agency for data, observations, and from wreckage analysis. And for consideration of what the impact will be. One of the things about the Eisenhower briefing document, it mentions a contingency plan should information have to be revealed. What if a saucer crashed in the middle of an all-star game, on international television, or the World Soccer matches? That would be something, wouldn't it? So you got to be ready to say something, do something. Contingency plans are a normal part of military planning. If the airplane crashes, if the ship sinks, you got to be ready. So, I think there are contingency plans out there.
Well, I think if they want to remain in control of this whole UFO situation, they're going to have to start releasing it because, someone's going to come forward. I mean, with all these cell phone
Well, I hope
cameras.
so. That's one of the reasons I'm... And there was a guy who worked at the Vatican who attended a couple of UFO conferences I was at, Father Balducci. And the Vatican has its own observatory. It's got two of them, I guess. So, things are maybe waiting in the wings out there.
Well, I hope so.
Incredible. We have analytical data on YouTube, and we're able to view where our viewers are coming from in regions from around the world, and it's quite interesting. Some of the biggest views are coming out of Iran. Iran is watching Third Phase of Moon. We have over 600 videos of UFO sightings from...
Once the YouTube...
If they want to remain in control of this whole UFO situation, they're going to have to start releasing
Sorry,
it.
folks, for the little screw-up.
Someone's going to come forward.
We're back to where we
all
were.
These cell phone
Well, I hope
cameras.
so. That's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. And I had a call from somebody who said, Stan, how come you're still alive? What do you mean? Well, you're saying the government's covering things up and so forth, and yet you're still alive? I say, look, I say the same things in public as I say in private. And much more important, I suppose, is anybody who listens to me for a while knows I respect national security. And I may be doing exactly what the government wants, getting the public ready for when the big day comes, cutting down on the terror and, all the other bad side of speaking out. Right. And I was, frankly, shocked. Almost 4 years ago, I guess, the then Pope said something to the effect that can see no reason why God could not have made our brethren in outer space just as he made us. And my first thought was, who's he been talking to? And there was a guy who worked at the Vatican who attended a couple of UFO conferences I was at, Father Balducci. And the Vatican has its own observatory. It's got two of them, I guess. So, things are maybe waiting in the wings out there.
Well, I hope so.
Incredible. we have analytical data on YouTube, and we're able to view where our viewers are coming from in regions from around the world, and it's quite interesting. Some of the biggest views are coming out of Iran. Iran is watching Third Phase of the Moon. We have over 600 videos of UFO sightings from around the world, and Iran is ranking up high as far as the views being watched on this. It's interesting that this country, from any other country around the world, is kind of glued to Third Phase. And we don't know why, but they might be watching it because they know something that we don't. It's an isolated country, and, Ahmadinejad, he's saying that he wants to go into outer space. He wants to be the first Iranian president or astronaut. And I think that's quite interesting. And I just want to, Freeman, I want to thank you for joining us here at Third Phase of the Moon. I'm going to get going. I'm going to leave it to Dr. John Elias and Preston Dennett to close it out. And I just want to tell everybody, if you captured anything amazing in regards to UFOs, you can contact Third Phase of the Moon via Skype or Facebook. So my name is Blake Cousins, and we'll see you guys next time.
Excellent, Blake. Thank you. We only got a few minutes left of the show, but just before we do, I want to remind all the listeners out there that we do want that footage submitted to. We want that footage submitted to the Third Phase of Moon for the 2 contests. Don't forget, we have Dr. Lear next week, and I want everybody to look at Stanton Friedman's website, stantonfriedman.com. Mr. Friedman, we got a couple minutes. Let's give the listeners what's the most important thing? We talked about some amazing stuff for the last couple hours. We talked some of the best cases. We talked about what we can do. We talked about other countries, possibly this information and technology being in the hands of private corporations. What more do we need? Dr. Lear was talking about in Brazil about this crash in '96 for Gina, I believe. Do you know much about that? Do you think the Brazilians are going to step up?
I was in Brazil, as it happens, when the first announcement about that was made, public announcement, and I participated with John Carpenter, a psychologist. We did an investigative interview with a number of the Brazilian researchers, and John distributed a lot of copies of that. It's a very good case. There are a lot of witnesses. Roswell wasn't the only crash. Incidentally, a new book, The Aztec Incident, by Scott and Suzanne Ramsey. Aztec is a small town in northwestern New Mexico in the Four Corners area. That happened in March of 1948. And the Ramseys, this book just came out last year. It's listed on my website. Did a bang-up job, found information nobody else had found. And so, it's not a one-time thing. Only one saucer lost its flying skills. Aztec was a crash, a big one. Recovery. Varginha is another. At the same time as Roswell was the one in the plains of San Augustine. That's described in my book, Crash at Corona, which is the small town closest to where the Roswell incident happened. They love me in Corona. They used to have a theater there, and on the marquee, when the 50th anniversary of Roswell happened, they said, "Forget about Roswell, it all happened here."
I think there's the crash and retrievals are one of the most important things. I think we have the people that were working on the crash retrieval teams. If they're given amnesty, they'll come forward and talk. And I hope that we, the citizens of the world, as human beings, are able to finally see this technology, see these alien beings, and I think we deserve it. Won't you agree?
Yes, I would like to have the 6 o'clock news feature latest data on the bodies at Roswell, on the wreckage that was recovered at Aztec.
Okay.
Varginha.
Mr. Friedman, it sounds like we are at the end of our show now. Everybody, thanks again joining us. We had the Godfather of Ufology. Join us again next week here at freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, 2 to 4 Eastern Standard Time with Dr. Roger Lear. Thanks again, and this is Dr. J. Andy Elias, and we'll see you next week.
There you go, folks. I really hope you enjoyed it. Sorry about the little screw up at the end. The computer started to crash. And by the way, if you guys want to support my work so I can get something newer that is more reliable, that would be great. But hey, I understand the economy's bad. Just you being here, enjoying this is really enough for me to say thank you very much. A couple things I want to say. The Varginha crash, as you mentioned, Mr. Stanton Friedman mentioned at the end of how phenomenal of a case it is that he was actually in Brazil. James Fox released a movie about that called Moment of Contact, which came out in 2022. I highly recommend you all see it. Personally, I like the movie before the phenomenon about the aerial school landing in Zimbabwe, 94, but still, Moment of Contact is phenomenal. Now, one thing he didn't include in that, which is something I recently found, seems to be the footage of one of the aliens that was found in Brazil. If you guys want to see that, let me know, and I will dig it up, and I'll do my best to find it and get it up here for you guys to see. Also, with what Stanton was saying about how these things are possibly in these private corporations, that thing has been proven more beyond a reasonable doubt. They are in these co-ops that are run by private military contractors like Raytheon, Boeing, Texas Instruments, and everything under the sun. And that's where a lot of these crash and retrievals, the craft actually reside. For instance, S4 was created by the CIA as a place for skunk works to test their stuff, particularly the U-2. I found a great CIA briefing video about, about Area 51. If you guys want me to upload it, I will. And the irony was, it was actually called Watertown, USA, back then before Area 51, because the 51 comes from the grid. There's 52, 53, 54, and I believe Area 54 is where the tall whites reside. So if you want to see that CIA briefing, let me know. I will upload it for you once I have it found again. And same thing with the Varginha alien, which I believe to be a very real video on that one. Also, if you enjoyed this very, very first interview I'd ever done on my own outside of that one time I appeared in the documentary with Dr. Roger Lear in Alien Human Project Part 2. I was the sole person to interview him on camera, and that's what caused me to be recruited here. Now, let me tell you a couple more things. There are another 50 plus, maybe even 70 interviews that are not posted on anywhere, unless you heard it live on Revolution Radio when they aired in 2013 and 2014. You would never know about these. Yes, 10 minutes or so of many of them appeared on Third Phase of Moon, and those 10 minutes were particularly when Blake called in, Blake Cousins of Third Phase of Moon. Outside of that, this is the first time this has been uploaded to YouTube, and I assure most of you have never heard this before. If you did enjoy this, I have several more, and I would love to bring them to you. I just wanted you guys to tell me in the comments. Also, I hope you enjoyed that footage. And again, Battle for Disclosure is coming out on December 10th on Amazon Prime. That's also part of the trailer you saw in the movie, but also the comics. Blake and Brent did 4 comics about UFOs, and some of it's based in reality. And you also saw some of that as well. So if you want to purchase those, go to Third Phase of Moon, their YouTube channel, and in their description, they have both of them. Or if you ask me in the comments, I will also provide you the links to buy them. Without further ado, I'm glad you guys joined me, and keep your eyes in the sky, and I will catch you next time.